Yeah, so whichever switch you were using last week, you should grab that one. Okay, Daniel. There are only 4 ASA in the room. So I'm gonna do the first part with half of the class, and then the other half, I won't be able to demo the ASA right now because there are only so many equipment and the students are using it. So I want you to know that, and then when I get a chance, I will try to add that in part of the video. Okay. Hey. All right. So let's check out the lab for today. And so do you have to do all of the stuff to add the wireless? No, but I want to kind of touch base on where we left off last week with Vlans and how Vlans can be used for wireless. The ASA is an appliance that normally is used for small business security. It is used to mainly control, and it functions as a wireless router. It also functions as a security appliance. So overall, you can have all-in-one device like that, right? So I want to give you a little bit more exposure, and I completely forgot that I only bought 4. As the last time I used this was years ago, when I taught 27. Okay, so maybe later on we'll reuse it again or other appliances. So I want you to have a little bit of exposure. So what I want to do while you're setting up and getting things ready is I'm going to talk a little bit about Vlans and what we're using Vlan for as far as wireless. Let me share screen on Zoom. And let me make this a little larger. And if we don't finish, we'll pick up because I know it can be a lot, but I know most of you've done the Vlan part in the first lab last week, so you should be all right. Okay. Okay, so these switches are generally the ones that we're using. If you're using the larger one, that's the 550X. And if you're using the black one, it says manage switch on the cart, on the rolling cart, or the rolling racks, that's the 350, which is a little smaller. If you're using the blue-green one, that's the Catalyst, which is an older one, okay? There's some slight difference. We already learned this last week that on the Catalyst, the speed is a little slower. So when you're using ASA, Catalyst, or any older equipment, you use 9600 baud. When you're using the newer switches, you're going to use 11,500 200 baud, okay, which is what we talked about before when we putty in. So the best way to do that, I said, is to look at the guide from Cisco. They usually give you the details on how to connect and how to set up your CLI. Okay. When you use the ASA, which is the smaller box, some of you have those. Make sure that you reset it. Okay. So when after they're done and when you get the ASA, you need to reset it. Otherwise, the configuration is there and you can't really do much to it, right? So there's a reset button, just like your Wi-Fi router. You just hold it down, right? Just press it, and then it will all blink, and then it resets. So what that does is it's going to put the OS back to the manufacturer settings. Okay. All right. So while we're setting that up, let me talk about the topology Vlan with wireless, because you can do all the configuration all day, but if you don't know how it logically sees the wireless side, then there's no point, right? We have to understand the networking part of it. So we know that virtual LAN can be tied to a physical port on your switch or router. Okay, if you want to play with the router, there are 2 up front. And there are gigabit Ethernet ports on the router. You don't have to use the switch. So on the routers, most routers will also support VLANs, okay? And it will be able to route VLANs just like layer 4 switch. So what we can do is we can use VLAN to segment the functionality of our network. So if you want to segment wireless network, that's probably the best, is to use an appliance and logically separate a portion of your network for specific things. Or if you want to use it for certain type of applications. So when you're looking at human resource finance and HR and all of those things, they might use certain type of database and certain application. So it's probably good to put them on one VLAN, right? So if you have a set of application that need to be used by certain department, put them on a VLAN, okay? And then, so the way that we simulate VLAN is that it's gonna be like your local area network. You're gonna have systems that are connected, but it basically is connected not physically to all of those ports on the switch, but we are gonna connect a baby switch that's unmanaged to this switch, and all the other systems are gonna connect to that baby switch. So as you can see here, right, like I can have phone, computers, and then I will connect it to an unmanaged switch, and that switch is then going to connect to the VLAN ports. Okay, so it's going to allow you to distribute the virtual local area network on a scale where you can scale out from the switch instead of connecting all of them into the switch and then manage each port individually. Okay, you can do that on the smaller scale. So let's say I have 20 systems and I'm connecting to all 20 ports. Can I group them on the VLAN? Definitely you can. And you're going to learn that today on how you can set VLAN range. So I can have a VLAN 30 and I can say that this is going to be port, 10 to 20, right? And it's going to group them together and make it a VLAN. Okay? All right. So now we can also set up broadcast, unicast, and multicast in that we would be how we want to use that port for forwarding and flooding. So when we say flooding, it's not just broadcasting everybody, right? When do we really broadcast that? We broadcast that when systems are looking for DHCP. We broadcast when systems are looking for servers, right? So that's what's called the flooding process. So it's going to send to everybody. It's going to say, hey, I'm looking for this. If you're it, tell me, right? So what we can do is we can use that port to be able to do certain things that we want on the network, like sending single direction unicast, or sending to everybody with the broadcast, or a group will be multicast. So then now it says that it can also be used to enhance performance by reducing the need for sending broadcasts. So instead of broadcasting from 10 ports, I'm only broadcasting from one port physically, right? That reduces your bandwidth use. You see? Instead of doing many of them broadcast from multiple ports, which sucks up all our bandwidth for just that purpose. Back in the day, the network would, they would set up broadcasts like on certain part of the network to physically really isolate it, so that way they can control it. But now when we have technology like this, we'll be able to do that. Okay, so it talks about that here. And then so this is kind of give you the example. So when you have all Cisco appliance, it's going to support VLAN at least at the default level. You're going to have at least one. Okay, on some of the appliance, it doesn't support additional VLANs, so it will just, you would just use the default, which is VLAN 1. You cannot relabel it because it's just VLAN 1. Okay, on the switches, the layer 4 switches, it supports VLAN, more VLAN, so you can have VLAN 10. That's just a common practice. We're going to go with 10, 20, and so on, right? Like we can say that this will be the admin department, another one will be the finance department, And we can simply group the IP address on how we want that virtual local area network to look. And you saw last week that when you're using certain class IP, you just gotta tweak the network identifier, right? So if you're using class C, this is the network identifier, so we modify that. So going from one to another, we're gonna do a 10 and a 20 here, right? That gives you 200 and something, 254 systems on each one. Okay, and then the same thing for VLAN 30, which will be like an operation department or manufacturing or something like that. Okay, so this is another topology, and yes, I took this from Cisco documentation because I didn't have time to draw this. So let's say that this is your Wi-Fi router, then this is like a small business. Okay, so when you learn to trunk, when you do that, what happens is it's gonna group up, right? We talked about trunk port, and it's gonna group up those ports to be able to set up those VLANs up for things like this, where we can add servers, and we will be able to add additional wireless access points. Okay, so I can plug this in, and I can plug the systems in, and then they would be treated as separate networks. Okay, but we need to trunk it, and so the router is going to be our public network interface that's going to send everybody out to the internet. Okay, now what happens if I don't want the server to be seen or to be sent out? It's only internally used. Yeah, I can control it through the switch, right? I can control that logical port where it will not have NAT. Okay, but if you want NAT, then you would set up the NAT on the appliance that's connected to it. It becomes a NAT appliance, and the book talks about that. And we touch on that. So I added this. We're not going to configure this today because I just need to make sure that all your appliances are capable of doing it. But you do know that dynamic interfaces are basically VLAN interfaces. You can create users, right? That would be for the LAN client for the wireless. So when you add a wireless network to your existing network, you can use what's called dynamic interfaces. Through the VLAN interface, it's going to allow systems to be connected wirelessly. And that's how we can manage the wireless clients through the VLAN. That's what it is. Okay. So here it allows you to control the wireless devices that are connecting to the VLAN, including when we're using DHCP relay. So DHCP relay is just, it's going to send it to the DHCP so that way it leaves addresses, right? It's like a middleman. Okay, so here it talks about different types or how dynamic interfaces is used with different VLAN, and also you can integrate different subnet, okay, and so on. So the way it logically will look is that you will have different VLANs here, and it's gonna pipe it through that port. And then the interface is gonna be the software side that it's going to logically control, right, and treat it as a wireless 1, 2, 3, 4. So in a, you know, my former students, they used to say, well, we can integrate wireless everything. Yes, you can, right? But how do you manage the wireless everything? On a backbone, right, which is where your switch, your routers and everything ends. So what you need to look at is how you can integrate something like this to be managing the VLAN that would be associated with wireless individually, even though it's grouping through trunk. Okay. All right. So now let's work on some VLANs for those of you who are not using the ASA. And so I keep forgetting to tell them to install Putty. So let's get Putty. 64-bit MSI for Windows 10, 64-bit. Then we're going to open up our device manager. Look at your COM. Oh, it helps if I plug mine in. Sorry. I did bring some extra. Okay, then plug your console cable in. I have a NIC that's a little touchy. Okay, so also make a note that when you're using appliances, you can always look at the documentation or the features on the appliance if it uses iOS, which is Cisco iOS, not Apple iOS, right? Then you can use CLI, okay? Like some of the wireless appliances, just gotta make sure that you can port into it or terminal into it. So mine is gonna be on COM6. So we are going to use serial COM6. And if you're using the Catalyst, you're gonna use 9600, but if we're using the newer switches, it's gonna be 115200. And then we want to check session and also for your serial connection, making sure that the baud and everything is correct. Open. Press enter and it should take a second for it to go and then enter again. So the default password is Cisco. Our username is Cisco and the default is Cisco. And then it says please change your password. We're not going to do that now. So now on the new switches, you don't have to go into enable, but anything that's older, you have to enable, which takes you to the preview, right? Exec mode. So what we're going to do is we are going to do a show VLAN as we wanted to check to see what's on that. If you don't know, even if you configure it like 2 days ago, right? You need to look at it because there could be another technician that went in and added another VLAN and they didn't tell you. Okay, so we want to make sure that we check. Okay, so right now I don't have anything, right? So what I can do, and if you do have it, it's fine, you can use another port. So what we're gonna do is we are going to also look at your interface status. Why do we do that? We would do that to do what? To see what kind of ports that we're working with, right? What kind of interface we're working with. Now, if you have a cable that's connecting and it's receiving signal, it's going to tell you it's up, not down. Okay. Any questions so far? So just like last week, so we want to take a screen capture of this. So I need to show VLAN and I need to show interfaces status. And status is going to give me the link state. If you do just show interface, it's a lot of stuff, right? And then you just hit Q to quit to get back to your see, it tells you here. For more information, if you press return, it'll just add more. So if you have 48 ports, it's going to list all 48. And then if I don't want all the additional stuff, I just hit Q to quit, and it brings me back to my mode, my preview mode. All right, so we got to this part, and then we are going to do arrange, and we are going to use port 14 to port 24, but make sure if you're using the catalyst, this is not a GE, right? It is an FA. So if you're using the newer switch, you're going to use GE. So we are going to configure terminal. So make sure you're in the configuration mode. Then you are going to issue this so you can access the interface and configure it. Okay. So we're going to do configure range. And we are going to do GE1/0/14. To 24. Oh, sorry, configure. I don't know why I typed interface. Interface range GE1/0/14. Okay, now you got the range set up, which is this. Right? So what we're doing is we're accessing those range ports. We're going to group them up, and we're going to make it a VLAN. Okay, now remember that in order to go from here, from your configuration terminal into a switch port mode, is that you have to be in an interface. You don't have to be in a range, but you have to be in a port interface. Okay? Because if it tells you command is not found, it's that if you're not in the right mode, it's not going to let you. Okay, so we're going to do switch port mode access. So what we're doing there is we're going to take those ports and we are going to make it. We're going to switch it. We're going to make it a switch port mode. And then we are going to make a switch port access VLAN 30. Now you can ID your VLAN anything you want, right? So if you already have a 30, you can make it a 50, you can make, because usually we want to sequentially follow, like we have a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, or VLAN 100, 200, 300. You can call it whatever you want. Usually they use a number, so it's easy to identify. And then we are going to return, or we're going to return the port or the range port to the default VLAN by doing a no switch port access VLAN. Then once we set up our VLAN, we're going to do an exit. And then we're going to do an exit again. Sorry, I skipped that one. So to exit. Okay, once we get to the preview mode, we are going to do a show VLAN. Oh my gosh. Hit delete. Show VLAN. Okay. Now we are going to save by doing copy running dash config startup config. What you're doing there is you're copying your configuration, which is in the running mode, to the startup configuration. So when that switch is fired up, it's going to use that stored information and it's going to load it for the startup. Okay, that's what you're doing. It's saved. It should save. You want to save, press yes, right? We're good? Okay, all right. Next, we're gonna go back to the configuration mode. So we're gonna do configure terminal. And now we are going to enter the interface. And note that I highlighted this. So if you already used 13 for something else, use another port, right? And notice that it's not in this range. We cannot use 14 to 24 wide. It's already been tied to a VLAN, right? So if you want to configure a trunk port on another port, because remember the diagram, right? It trunks on a separate port, and then you have a group that's going to be a different range. Okay, so if you're using 14 to 24, then you're going to trunk on the other one. Okay, so let's do that. We're going to do interface GE1/0/13. And you can use like 25 if you have 48 ports. You can use another port, right? Just remember, why do they label the cable is when you plug things into each port, they all look the same at one point. And then after a year or 2 or 5, 10 years, right, you're going to get confused, right? We're going to remember the next day. But so when you plug the cable in, make sure you label the cable, okay? So now we're in the interface for 13, and then we're going to make it a switch port mode trunk. Now, not all switches can trunk, okay? Just keep in mind that some of the catalysts don't trunk. The 2960 should. If it did take the command, is it possibly that there is some issue with the OS itself, or you know, maybe you're not in the right mode, right? You have to be in the right interface. Okay, next, what we're gonna do is we are going to, so I made note of this, okay? Because I combed through the documentations on the Catalyst 2960. When you're using the Catalyst, you have to do switch port trunk native VLAN 30 because it doesn't, on the Catalyst, it doesn't have the individual VLANs. It uses the native VLAN. There are 2 VLAN modes. It's either native VLAN or VLAN, right? That you can trunk. So when you trunk, you have to trunk back to the native VLAN. Okay. Now, it says use the switch port trunk allow VLAN command to specify the VLANs the port belongs to the mode that's configured for the trunk. So if you want all your VLANs to trunk, right, that means that can group, then you can do all, right, on the VLAN. But if you want a certain VLAN, you can say VLAN number, or you can say everybody except for 10 or 50 or 100, right? So it would do everything except for that one. So we're going to do an all. So we do switch port mode trunk allow and then VLAN all. Oh, it says parameter switch port mode trunk allow. Same. Let's try 30. Like that. I need space. $13. Maybe it's already allowed. Let me check, okay? Maybe on this one. Let me look at their guide real quick. Is it SX? So we're doing switch access VLAN, exit, and show VLAN. We saved, yes. Configure, we do a range, we do port 13, mode trunk. Yeah, it should take that command unless we have a syntax, which mode trunk allow. All add. So even on Cisco documentation, as you can see, there's still, we have to troubleshoot it, right? See, it does say that. It does say that here, switch port allow VLAN. So I didn't lie, right? And the format. So let's try, it says add VLAN list of VLAN IDs to add to the port. Let's try something. Let's try. So I'm gonna go back to the configuration mode, right? Configure terminal, and then I'm gonna do interface. What was it? GE1/0/13. And we already trunk it, so we are going to do a switch port. and then allow, or is it allowed or we add? Yeah, so we can say allow VLAN. Oh. Okay, it took it that time. I might have had a syntax on mine when I wrote it. Switch port shrunk allow VLAN. Switch port, yeah, shrunk. There it is. Shrunk allow VLAN. Oh. And you can do an add, right? Like if you want to do an add, you would do switch port trunk allow VLAN add VLAN 30 to, I don't know, 50, something like that. I'll re-upload this. Okay. So after that, we're going to do a show interfaces for this particular trunk. So we're going to exit and repeat. Sure. Okay. Then we're going to do a show VLAN. And then we are going to do show interfaces. /0/13. And I think we're going to do a switch port. Interface. Like the show interfaces. Let me try something with it. I think it might not like the show this gigabyte. I don't think it's going to take 1 second. So, So you can actually access it using Putty with the IP address once you set up the IP address. Maybe on the D switch it doesn't let you do that anymore. It should. Show IP interface. I guess you have to do the status. It doesn't let you do the other one. So you can do show interface status. And then you just, if you hit return, and it's just gonna go all the way down. But all that is just gonna be connected. I don't like these documentations because sometimes they don't really tell you a lot. It just gives you the command. Instructions. Inspection payment, registration, sneaky. I think Vlan itself could be a class, right? In the routing class, and switching class, you will have more. So voice VLAN, voice VLAN. Huh? Yeah. Switch port GE10. Thanks for showing. Yeah, it's only showing the native on mine, but maybe I didn't save. And then, yeah, it should show your trunk there. But I wonder if there should be an option where it lists on the VLAN table, except for show VLAN, right? Q. Yeah, this is just to the port, so I guess you do switch port. That will be fine. So it shows you trunk 1. And then your access mode VLAN is 1. We enable those. So for this one, let's fix that. I wonder if you do. Yeah. Switchboard trunk. Yeah, it doesn't like the extra parameter. So we can skip this one. Just take a screenshot there after you do this. And then save your configuration. And then you do an end. Okay, questions? Just interface noise. That's what it's like. No, blank. Nope. That's what it's like. No type anything. Okay, so while some of the students are working on that, you can also work with someone if you want. Some of them have the ASA. Okay. So when you have the ASA, the way that you connect to it is to use 9600 baud instead of the 115200. Okay. When you enter it, you have to enable to go to the preview mode. And then you are to configure, you got to go to the configure terminal. You cannot start typing in the command if you're not in these two modes. Okay, we talked about that before. Sorry, I forgot to bold this. To set up your domain, you simply use a domain name and you would just put in your URL. You don't have to put the www dot, just like your domain. What that's going to do is going to use the root, which is a .com, and then your fully qualified domain name, right? So you name anything you want there. Then to do DHCP, you are going to, now the ASA has the capability to lease IP address, or yeah, lease IP address with the DHCP. So you are going to use the DHCPD, and the pool that you create is this. So what that does is it's going to create a pool called inside, and it has the IP address range from 101 to 110. Okay. And if you want to tie the DNS server, right, to it, you would use DHCP. Remember how when you configure DHCP, it asks you for the DNS, right?
So you would put in the DNS servers, right? In this case, we have two. We have a .2 and we have a .129. Okay. If you have more, you just add it and separate it by the space, no comma. Then you want to set up the wins. So you would use the DHCPD and then the IP for the wins. Okay. So this kind of walk you through on how to use Cisco CLI to really set up your DHCP. And also the ping timeout and the lease time. So you can set up, and they are by seconds. So you can set up by the amount of seconds that you want. Okay. Okay, so when you read this, what is okay, so save your work. This part should be fast, just a lot of information, right? So when you set up the lease, you just put in the amount of time. So it tells you here that the default is 3,600. Now you just calculate out the amount of seconds that you want to lease the IP for. If you want to set up the ping timeout, which is the value for the ICMP packets, then the default is going to be 50 milliseconds. And you can set up like the amount that you want it to be timeout. You know how when it pings and if it doesn't respond, when should it be say that it's timeout, right? So we can set it up. So in the case where it's looking for the DHCP and it's trying to connect, we can time it out at a certain period of time. Okay, then you can enable, once you set up your DHCP, the way that you enable it is you just say enable and then whatever your DHCP scope name would be, that will be there. So if you say outside or IT or finance department, that will be just the name following that, okay? And here it also walks you through on how to use Gigabit Ethernet pool for IPv6. So you are going to create a DHCP server pool for IPv6. Okay. Now, since last week we talked about the relay, you can relay it to a certain server. The IP address of that server needs to be here. Pretty straightforward, very easy. And then we set up timeout and then DDNS update. And that is it. So if we don't get to the ASA today, we can pick it up next time. Okay. And I only want like the last screenshot actually when you finish. Right. Show run brief. Oh yeah, but that's an different. Yes, you can see. Inside or outside one. Yeah, I mean, that's research. Fine.
trying to do? The sole switchboard one?
Yeah. It's weird because
Are you in the right mode? Okay, so yeah, it should say the hashtag.
oh yeah. Wait, I'm confused. I'm sorry. Oh, oh. Yeah, I did that. This one, right? Sorry. So this one, the hashtag, that's user mode, right?
Because you're not in the right mode. Right, what mode are you in? Configuration mode, right? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'm in the right one. So you have to switch to show interface switchboard.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Let me write that down. Oh no.
For the second one, this one is good. Yeah, so, yes. Why? Oh, yeah, so file name, so that will be startup, copy running config to startup. So, yeah, that will be.
That's what I did it for one interface. Yeah, just substitute it, right?
Oh, I held on to it too much.
So that's your source
Oh, well.
file name.
That's pretty fast. Oh, but you do it so that mine would have to, I'd have to press button just to get it to scroll.
Just hold on to it
Screenshot, you're done.
and then
Or maybe I put show.
Oh, I see what you're doing.
yeah, I accidentally put show interface switchboard and not like the right one.
Yeah, so the interface needs to be next to the actual interface value, like gigabit Ethernet. David is done, so he's gonna give you that one, and then when one of them is done. Yeah, till 6. Yeah, that one. That one's a little tricky because on this one it's a little different. Okay. So you do that, you're saving it, right?
I already saved it.
Okay. Oh, show run read. Okay. You tried this, have you done the show running? Okay, good. Showing you that. Hold on one second. Fonzo, did you have a question?
Yeah, to reset it, do I need like something really small or it's
Yeah, just like a pen or a pencil or something metal like a pin. It doesn't let you do run breathe, huh? Okay, that's fine. Your configuration. Yeah, I use their me see. Yeah, these ones, they also have the interfaces too, where you can just use the GUI. See if I can find the CLI documentation on that one. Yeah, the show running dash config should work, or you can use show running config, show startup config after you save it. Oh. Error there. So make sure that we do show running config. Okay. Show running, yeah. Just show run. Yeah, no. I guess they took that parameter out for the. Depending on the version of OS that you're using, so if you're using like an older version of FreeScript, you can leave it plugged in for them. Or, yeah, because Michelle's gonna get David's, he's done. So Jarrell and Cynthia can use that one. Thank you. Upload the. Where are you at? So you're in the configuration code. And then did you do the DNS? The domain dash name. All right, it's all that. Just do the domain. plug it in? Oh. Okay. It's a little smaller. No, you, right there. David, right there. It's just on that one, you're not gonna have like a set of ports. So you just, yeah. Sure. Show interface. Show interface switch port. Show interface switch port. Type again. Show interface switch port. /13. Okay. So the interface needs to be next to the value, and then whatever the attribute for the interface is trying to show is needs to be next to that. Okay. Are you done with the switch?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you disconnect it? David also, you can also use this one. Do you want to use this one instead of the router?
Well, better.
It will be more like close to what the instruction will be. So you want to, yeah, you want to keep the, you have a cable for that already?
Yeah.
Okay, so just leave everything there. So all that is the rate of
Oh, okay.
GI or GE also works, because GE stands for Gigabit Ethernet. But you can use exactly how it's typed, that's fine. So if you're doing the ASA, start with this section. I didn't bold the domain name for step 35, just make sure that it's a complete, right? And it should work. Except for the last one. It's so long. So maybe space. Take that here. Oh, you didn't have the space. You had the space. Put timeout at 20. Yeah, there is a space. So when you get to this right here, you can name this, you know, you don't have to do this one. Omit that one. Do one scope is fine. What are you doing? Yeah, it won't. Yeah, I couldn't get the trunk to show on this version either. So that's fine. You can skip that one. And then you just do the next step. Okay. You stuck at the same thing, right? CP ping timeout. You hit a space 20. Is it exactly like that? Okay. If it doesn't take that, that's okay. Yeah, this is optional. It should take it though. Highlighting it for the ones that it didn't register. That was up. No? Okay, it's fine. Just go along with that. So 40 is not gonna do for the 5560. Even though Cisco says that it works right here. So for step 40, you can skip 40. Oh, did you set 9600 for the well? Yeah, I just skipped that one. Their documentation doesn't work. It could be that the version of the OS is different. Okay, and then when you get to 53, it's running config or show run. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. No password.
Still secure, right?
So Cynthia, if you have to go, we can do it next time.
Okay, I can leave.
You sure?
After what's the
Or
number?
you can do it with Jerome to start it.
Oh, did he? Oh, okay. For number 47. Sorry.
Yeah, so for 47, just the second one will not work.
Oh,
Yeah, because we only need to set up one actually.
Okay.
So you can name your server with the scope, whatever the, because you only set up the outside, so it's only gonna be able to see the outside one. So yeah, the second one was never set up, so it's not gonna work. And then 40, you don't have to do 40. You skip 40.
Oh, yeah.
which number? are you? Oh, sure.
Stop recording. It's gonna be a period of no nothing. I'm gonna stop recording real quick.